Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Yes, I'm back in the country. I was getting a little bit worried that I wasn't going to be back in time for the Spurs game at one point. I was meant to be flying back on Thursday night. We had some technical issues with the flight, and they delayed it originally 36 hours because they had to. It was all very much like you'd gone into a garage and a mechanic. They were like, we've got to go and get the part. There's a part, but it's in the UK, and we've got to fly it over here to America. And I was a bit like, right, can you not just put us on another flight? But eventually we got back 24 hours later than expected, which, first world problems. You end up getting kind of a half a day extra and ended up kind of being on the holiday. But hey, I got back in time. Got back. A little bit jet lagged on Sunday, but what a game to return to! If I could have picked a match to come back to, it would certainly have been that one. I did have a fear that because Villa at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium have been a bit of a kind of a bogey side in that respect. But Spurs have won at Villa Park, but for some reason at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, like last season, they absolutely battered Villa with like some of the best football, despite having a kind of a bit of a reshuffled side, especially defensively, and somehow came away with a defeat. So I was a bit like, oh no, I'm going to return. Everyone's going to go, Jigs, he's the Jigs. He causes the problems. Although I did miss the Palace game. Praise the Lord, I missed the Palace game. I watched it, but I wasn't there. I do feel for anyone that had to go to Selhurst Park to watch that. But yeah, so what a game to return to. I was told that the atmosphere was really good on Wednesday night for the City match. I watched that slightly differently. I watched that on my phone in a Miami mall, sat next to an old American chap who was absolutely puzzled and I think slightly scared because I think when I'm not watching them with reporter head on, with my journalist mode fully set to 100%, and I just watch them away from it all with no kind of thoughts about what I have to write or say or anything, I reverted fully back to fan mode, which was really interesting. I kind of haven't really had the experience of having to do that for a little while. And yeah, so when Werner scored and Sarr scored both times, I'm like, yes, kind of thing. I turned into this massive, I guess back to what I always was beforehand, a Spurs fan and always have been. And this poor old boy next to me was utterly confused while I was yelling at my phone. Ironically, the one game I watched on a big screen, my nephew lives in Charlotte, and I went to go and stay with him for a couple of days and his family, was the Palace game. We went to this sports brewery bar place near him. I wish that one had been on my phone and I had really poor coverage. The one I watched on a big screen was the worst out of the bunch. But yes, I was back in the stadium, back at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And I was told, the atmosphere there was terrific. Everyone was telling me for the City game was great. And I actually thought that the atmosphere yesterday was really good as the game wore on. And I found it really interesting that John McGinn said after the match, it got loud. Probably as loud as I've ever heard it as an away player. That was a big compliment. I don't think he just meant in terms of his trips to Tottenham. I think he meant as an away player anywhere, unless I'm reading into that incorrectly. And it did get noisy. That equaliser, after the equaliser, it was just backs to the wall for Villa because everyone inside that stadium, barring the Villa fans in the corner, were absolutely roaring Spurs on to get the win. And they did, 4-1. That's a big win. That is, you always kind of hear me, my gripe about this is that people keep moving the goalposts when it comes to Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham. It's a bit like, oh, you've only beaten easy teams. And it's like, well, the test for you will be going to Old Trafford and winning against Man U. And then they do it, and it's like, oh, yeah, but Man U are rubbish. It's like, oh, okay. And then it's like, see if you can beat Man City. And then they beat Man City. And it's like, yeah, it was a Man City, it was loads of changes. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And it's like, okay. And then it's like, oh, but the real test will be Villa. Villa are flying. Villa are a great team under Unai Emery. And then they beat Villa 4-1 as well. That's his sweep them aside. And it's kind of, I guess now it's like, oh yeah, but it's at home. Spurs are good at home, they're not good away. And it's like, oh, for goodness sake. It's just I find it mad. Just enjoy it. They've won 9 out of 11 games. This is People talk about inconsistency, but if you're looking at current form, and 11 games is a big portion of time, that's it. That's consistent for now. 9 wins out of 11 is a great run. Yeah, we want more away wins. I'm going to talk about that as this goes on as well. But I just enjoy it. I just loved being back at the stadium. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder, and it does. It does. I came back and I was like, I'm ready for this, even though there's a little bit of fear of Villa being the bogey side again. But, Spurs did it and the goals were great. It was just the feeling at that final whistle, the jubilation that plays, all those songs we know that play at the final whistle when Spurs have won, they were pumping out. Postecoglou walking across, his name's being sung, he's blowing kisses to his family who sit just behind us, behind the press box, and just everything, seeing his interactions. I just loved it. It was great to be back. While I enjoyed being a fan, again, I did enjoy being a fan and a journalist. It's good fun. It's good fun. I'm a very fortunate man. But it didn't feel like it was going to go that way. There was a point in the first half where the Villa way was working. Their way that they absolutely pack in numbers around their own box and try and hit on the counter-attack. It was creating very little. It wasn't creating any space, pretty much, for the Tottenham attacking players. And you could see the frustration. They weren't particularly creating a lot themselves, Villa. But then, of course, came that goal. We'll go into that a little bit more depth later, but essentially, Spurs conceded from a set piece. Only their second of the season from a corner or free kick. But, of course, the pundits go, look, let's lump it in with the numbers from last season and make it look like a crisis this season, when actually they've vastly improved the defending from set pieces. Again, another thing we'll talk about as it goes on, because as you can tell, I find it slightly annoying. So Morgan Rogers slams the ball into the net. Half-time, there's boos. I think there's a combination of boos at the result, but also I think a large degree towards the officials, with some slightly iffy decisions and the time wasting that Villa kind of do, especially through Emi Martinez. And then the second half arrived. And everything changed. It was beautiful. Whatever Postecoglou said at half-time, whatever little tactical tweaks he made, it worked. Again, we've got to give credit to these things because Spurs were a different beast in the second half. Sonny back in the team, beautiful curling low ball into the box for Brennan Johnson to slam home his 7th goal of the season. I think Solanke might have even got it behind him, so one of them was always going to put it away. But Solanke was not to be deterred. He then does what any £65 million striker will do if you give him the ball, is chip it delightfully over the goalkeeper. We'll talk about the service. That was one thing I noticed when I was watching the game. I was getting very frustrated, was the lack of service to Solanke in the last few games. He's working so hard, and it's like, give him the ball. How do you expect him to score? And I still had people that were popping up on my social media, like replying under the tweets I have to do during the game. Oh, Solanke's rubbish. If I could buy a £65 million striker, eh? And all this sort of stuff. It's like, well, give it a ball. Let him have a go. What's he supposed to do? Just hit an imaginary ball and pretend he scored? You've got to get it to him. And lo and behold, beautiful pass from Kulusevski. Chips it over the keeper. The recently crowned world's best goalkeeper, Emiliano Martinez. Then Solanke scores again. Scores a lovely run. Smashes home Richarlison's terrific low ball. And then, of course, the cherry on top of the Tottenham cake, which is James Maddison's beautiful curling free kick in added time. Added time that Emi Martinez pretty much handed to Tottenham in order for Maddison to score that goal. When I say about, we talk about the oppositions that Spurs play and kind of playing it down sometimes, Villa only lost one Premier League game before they went into this encounter. Spurs have now added a little second one into that column. They are a good side. They are. They're very well coached by Unai Emery. He has his very set way of playing, and it works for them. They've got some really good players in there. But Spurs essentially tactically figured out how to play the game. And again, that has to go down to Postecoglou. This is what I mean. We will often kind of chuck out criticism when we don't like things that managers do, and myself included. But when you can clearly see in a game one team figure out the tactics of another and get around it, got to give credit. absolutely got to give credit to the manager and also the players as well, who worked incredibly hard. So Tottenham Hotspur are now the Premier League's top scorers. I think it's 22 goals, is it? I think it's 22 goals in the Premier League, 32 across all competitions in their 15 games. And people might say, oh yeah, scoring goals but letting in. But actually, at the other end of the pitch, only 3 teams have conceded fewer than Spurs in the Premier League this season. So it's not like they're, leaking goals galore, or maybe a big group of teams are leaking goals, I don't know. But only 3 have conceded fewer than Spurs this season. And like I said, we know the figure that Postecoglou side have won 9 of their 11 past 11 games in all competition. They won every single one of their cup games. And, you look for a response. You're going to have, with a young team, you're going to have sometimes inconsistent games. Palace clearly was the one of this current little kind of block of a few games. But they came back and they showed character. They beat Manchester City and then they beat Aston Villa in the space of 4.5 days. 2 top 4 sides at that point. Of course, City in the cup, but still a very good top 4 side. They just got this kind of character and belief in themselves. Spurs often, there's the Spursy tag, we know it's out there. We've spoken about it before. In actuality, it's those kind of results where they've lost a 2-goal lead and lost the game, I think it works out as that happens once every 3 seasons, or maybe more, something like that. It's one of those stats that's kind of stuck, but actually Spurs maybe more so should also be known for doing it the other way round, of coming back and winning games when they are behind. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, that you should be behind doing that, but it does show character and the ability to do that. They actually, I just realised, that they've actually scored. It's only 2 matches this season Spurs haven't scored a goal in those 15 games. Just cross my mind. I saw one of the notes I've made and was trying to work out what exactly I'd put there. But they're coming back into games. So they equalled a Premier League record yesterday for home wins when conceding first in a single year, because this was their 8th comeback to win at home in 2024. In total at home, they've claimed 24 points from losing positions, which is 10 more than the second place team in that stat, Man City. So again, we can absolutely argue, should they be going behind in the first place? And that's a very valid argument. But at least they're responding and their heads aren't dropping. They're not being Spursy. They are not collapsing and they're coming back and they're winning those games, or a lot of those games anyway. And I love the energy levels. The energy, in midweek, Villa played Palace, wasn't it? They lost in the Carabao Cup to Palace. And I think they changed most of their team. It might have been 10 of the 11 players, perhaps. We know that Postecoglou only made 3 changes from the City game to the Villa game, despite the fact that it was only, 4 days later. So a draining match against Man City. Look, I was reading the headlines, reading the stories from abroad. Much was made of Man City's youthful lineup. City put out the kids against Tottenham. So I kind of looked at it. I was like, oh, really? Spurs' average age of their starting 11 on the night was 24.8. Man City's 26. It was not a team of kids. They had a couple of kids in there. There were a couple of the first teamers not in there. Haaland wasn't playing. We know that. But that was still a very, very good team they put out there, just with a couple of kids sprinkled in as well. You look at some of the players in there, and when I saw the build up and I was reading the stuff like, oh, he's going to put out the kids, and I saw the starting 11, I was like, what? Where are the kids? Spurs have got more. Spurs have got Archie Gray, coming up against City as an 18-year-old right back and things like that, and it was just, I found that a bit funny. But anyway, the point of saying all of that is that City are a team that are going to dominate possession, as they did. They had a lot of good players in their team still, and Spurs had to do a lot of chasing and running, yet they should have been drained by that game. But such is the fitness of this Postecoglou side that yesterday, against Villa, who had, 10 fresh players, they just were the stronger, fitter side as the team, as the match wore on. Spurs won the ball back 11 times in the final third. Shows how hard they were pressing and pushing up there. Villa, how many times do you think they won it in the final third? And Spurs, other end of the pitch? 0. They did not win it once, which also is testament to Spurs passing around the press. And also, I'd probably say a slight lacklustre approach from Villa as well. And also the running. So Spurs ran a combined 110.5 kilometres to Villa's 104.4 kilometres, despite their extra midweek efforts. And I just think, I hate to kind of go over something I've always say and always parrot, but not Troy. But I do believe the best version of Tottenham Hotspur is a constantly running, pressing, snarling, aggressive, pressing version of themselves. Always felt that way under Pochettino, and I feel this way under Postecoglou. And it's there in the results. When they put that intensity into their performances, they win the games. And they often win them, with something to spare. They'll do it and they'll win by a couple of goals at least. And it's the games against Palace, which look like just thought they could turn up and win by not really doing much. And it's like, why? You've got all this evidence laid out in front of you. Look at this game where you ran your hearts out, you competed, you battled, you played great football, you won it. Look at this game where you went, yeah, we're great, we're going to win this, and didn't really do anything. And shock horror, you lost it. It's like, you just kind of... But then again, that is something that you're going to get with a younger side on the whole, I suppose, or younger players within them. And that's, I guess, when you need your leaders to step up and say, come on, this game is not won before the whistle's even blown. You've got to put everything in. That's what you've got to do. And Postecoglou said after the game, you're playing a top team. With Villa, they're always going to have a really strong performance because they're very, very consistent. They rarely have off days, and you've got to be ready for that. I thought we had to match it with them in the first half. We had to draw on their energy and make them work really hard. Obviously, we conceded a goal, but I still felt like we made them work really hard in that first half. And the thing with us is we've got another gear in us, 2 or 3 gears, and we keep going. And we felt like we could really break them open in the second half if we just really stayed focused on making sure the football was up tempo and there was intensity in the game. And credit to the players after a massive effort on Wednesday night. At least they know that physically they did it again. And that's exactly it. They are one of the fittest teams, if not the fittest in the Premier League. This relentless, we never stop brand of football, and Postecoglou's ability to make changes, which we'll talk about, especially in this game. I felt the changes also really added to it as well. And a lot of that comes down to the minutes they're getting, which is another thing he said early in the season, and we'll talk about that. The other thing he did is actually in the second half of his answer to me, I asked him about Pape Matar. And I just thought it was a really classy nod to mark what was an emotional day for the club as well, and one of his coaches in particular. So if you weren't aware, yesterday was, or would have been, still was, I guess, the birthday of Ugo Ehiogu, the former, some people know him as, he was an England international, played 4 times as centre-back for England, mainly probably known as a defender for Aston Villa, Middlesbrough as well. But he became quite a big part of life at Tottenham Hotspur. He became the club's under-21s manager. He worked for, I think, a little period beforehand, kind of part-time within the academy. Then he came in full-time as the under-21s boss. I think he was there for almost 3 years in that role. Had a widespread influence around the academy. Very popular guy. Helped develop a lot of young players who really kind of took to him and saw him as a mentor, father figure type. And a lot of coaches really loved working with him. But of course, if you're not aware, April 20th, 2017, he suffered a cardiac arrest at Hotspur Way and died the following morning, which is just absolutely shocking. It left the whole club was in shock, and probably nobody more so within the club than Matthew Wells. Matt Wells was Ugo Ehiogu's assistant manager in the under-21s. He was his right-hand man, worked with him every single day. So that would have been a big, big, big loss for him. Obviously, Matthew Wells now is the assistant to Postecoglou in the first team. And what happened this week was that Matt Wells spoke to the first team. Matt Wells is a brilliant communicator. I've had a chat or two with Matthew Wells on tour. I've seen him out there, and he is a great communicator, and that's what all the players say as well. So he used kind of his ability to do that this week, to speak to the players, many of whom, I was trying to think, only Sonny and Ben Davies probably would have been at the club, I think, when Ugo Ehiogu was there in terms of the first team players. I believe so, unless I'm missing someone really obvious. So Matt Wells, spoke to the players and just spoke about Ugo Ehiogu's values and everything, kind of what kind of person he was, what happened to him, and from what Postecoglou said, it just impacted the players. It really did. They really kind of took it all on board and kind of just, I guess, imbued them with this understanding of what a guy he was, Ugo Ehiogu, as well. So when he was answering me about Pape Matar, you could tell sometimes managers come in with something they want to say, and he did just segue into speaking about this. He said, "I'm really proud of the lads. It was an important day for us today because it's also the birthday of the late Ugo Ehiogu, and he had a big influence on Matty Wells here at the club. I know he played for Villa, but he was obviously a coach at our football club. Matty spoke really strongly about him. When you hear things like that and how people affect your life, it helps give clarity to the players about what we're trying to do here. Obviously, for his wife and his son, probably a tough day, but hopefully they get a little bit of cheer from the fact that Wellesley made it a really important point that he may be gone, but he's not forgotten. He just spoke about it during the week. We mentioned him today because it was his birthday today. Like I said, you don't dismiss those kind of things because he was with our football club when he sadly passed away. It's important that the memory lives on." And I just thought that was just really... I loved the fact that he brought that out there because, a lot of us absolutely did not twig that it would have been his birthday. And also, what are the chances that on his birthday, Spurs would be playing Villa? It's just like that. That's just incredible coincidence, the way these things work. I just thought it was very classy all round. I thought from Matt Wells to talk to the players, the impact it had on the players as well, Postecoglou to bring it up on a day, and hopefully this was a performance that that everyone would have been proud of, and one that Ugo Ehiogu would have been proud of as well. On the performance, lots of real positive displays in there as well. Two for me that I want to pick out first. For me, are the perfect example of selfless players never stopping moving and getting their rewards, and that is Dominic Solanke and Brennan Johnson. They're the first two I want to say. Don't worry, they're not the only two that are going to get some praise. There's some really good stuff that went on in the team. But with those two, they were the ones that kind of stuck in my head. I thought, Pape Matar as well, but I'm going to give him his own little section. And I looked up on who scored. I always do. That's a good place I go to for various stats and things like that. And they do stat-based rankings. And interestingly, Solanke and Johnson were the top two ranked players for Spurs in yesterday's game. Solanke got 8.76 and Johnson 7.8. So if you're not aware how that's all worked out, it's all the stats are kind of bundled together, and it kind of creates the algorithm, creates the rating. So sometimes what we see with our eyes, the stat-based ratings are actually quite different. But they both did very well in this, and the strange thing about it is that they managed to do that despite being the two players who touched the ball the fewest out of Spurs' starting 11. Johnson touched it 36 times, Solanke only 19 times, and it felt like they were more involved. But it's just because of their work off the ball. That was the key thing. There was just so much effort. Johnson first half for me, he was just chasing down. I was really kind of watching what he was doing, and off the ball, he was chasing every single lost cause. And he got his reward. Was it 4 minutes into the second half? That position that Postecoglou is constantly, and the coaching staff are drilling into him to take up. When the ball is on the other flank, race into the back post, race in there. And that's what he did. And he just smashed. I mean, the ball was brilliant from Son. Such a perfect ball. What I loved about that is that often the wingers are told, or the fullbacks, get to the byline and pull it across. But Sonny's got so much talent, he was able to curl it in from the kind of the edge of the box. Excuse me, I'm not used to doing all the talking, so my throat is trying to go like, what are you doing? After we had that run, didn't we, of 7 consecutive games in which he scored for club and country, 6 for Spurs, Johnson's had to wait a little while. I think it's 3 Premier League games for the next goal to arrive. And he said after the game in his club interview, yeah, it's been a little wait, especially in the last few games and most of the season. I've been getting good chances, which makes me happy because it means I'm in the right areas. But today I had to be a bit patient. Not too many chances in the first half, but you have to stay in the right positions. That's what Villa do, as in breaking up the game. They're a real quality side. I think it shows how they've been getting on this season, especially last year. So we knew we were up against it. We weren't up against any old team. They're a proper team. So naturally, they're going to have moments where they frustrate us and kind of work their game plan better than we do ours. But the second half was just about kind of kicking on, staying positive, staying clear-headed and showing our quality. And I love the fact that what he did, he gave a little kind of like fist bump of celebration, but essentially just grabbed the ball, went back to the centre circle when he was asked about that as well. And he said, well, look, it's easy to want to get a rest and reset and go again, but that's just not how we play. To be honest, it's get the ball down, go again, especially when we score goals. It was so early on in the second half. We've still got 40 minutes to kick on now. And once it was 1-1, we knew the game had just got started. It wasn't that we clawed it back. We knew we wanted to go and win this now. And he did. He just never stopped from that moment. He was chasing everything down. He admitted that when he saw the 10 minutes of added time go up at the end, he was like, oh my God. But he still kept going. I think even after that in added time, there was one moment where he sprinted down the flank just to take the ball away from the Spurs penalty area. And he's in a good place right now. He's really just kind of loving life at Spurs. You can see he's a very popular guy within the club. His football's clicking now. And of course, he's not getting any of the ridiculous stuff he was getting beforehand. And he said, I'm loving playing for this team, playing under the staff and the manager. And I think as a team, we're at a good point at the minute. I think everyone's really working hard for each other and it feels more and more of a family, to be honest. We're all a year stronger into this experience with the manager. And I feel like games like today just show how far we've come on. The fans were singing his chant as well. And when he was asked about it, he kind of smiled, no doubt thinking back to kind of a lot of the flack that he was getting. And he said, yeah, I am enjoying it, to be honest. It's been a while since they've sung it, but yeah, it's nice. It's top when they sing, and especially shooting in front of that big south stand. Once the momentum gets up, it's a real special place to be. So massive thanks to all the fans, and long may it continue, hopefully. He does score quite a few in front of that south stand. Maybe it's just because Spurs do score a lot of second half goals, and often if they win the coin toss, so they'll kind of work it so that they're playing towards that big stand in the second half. But yeah, Johnson I thought had a really good game. I thought it was one of those that might go under the radar a bit. His goal, of course, will be noted, but I think a lot of his work off the ball maybe wouldn't have gone noticed otherwise. And that is something that his teammates always say about him as well, that you maybe don't notice everything he did. Even in, I think Solanke mentions it in a quote that I've got coming up, even for, yeah, I think it was Solanke's first goal. Johnson is the one that kind of gives the ball to Kulusevski at one point in the build-up. I mean, talking about Solanke, I said it earlier, he's been feeding off of scraps. He absolutely has. He had so little service. I think while I was away, people were talking about the fact that, you know, didn't he not have a shot on target in 3 games or something like that? Yeah, it was, and that's because he wasn't getting the ball. So it's very simple. If you feed him, he will score. Who was that? Was it Sean Goethe that used to say that about Man City? But yeah, and that shouldn't be the case for a Postecoglou striker. They should not be starved of service. That ball should constantly be going into the middle for them. But for one reason or another, that hasn't been the case in recent games, and he's been having to, I mean, I think he's always going to work incredibly hard, but he's kind of finding himself all over the pitch, and maybe that's also an element of why he's not always in the position where they might be looking for him, because he's working back. But the system, it already fits him like a glove, but I think he'll understand it more and more and more as he continues to play the games. And he's just watching him. It tires you out just watching him. He presses, he hassles, he harries from the first whistle until they have to drag him off the pitch at the end of the game. And I think much of the space that the other attacking players get is because of the work he does, whether that is just simply dragging a couple of defenders with him, or whether it's the way he can receive the ball, spin and play them into space. And he got his reward finally. His teammates decided they were going to repay him with the ball. There was one early chance when Destiny Udogie found him. It was quite nice. Lovely bit of play from Destiny down the left. And then Solanke just did a bit of a step back in the box. a doggy finds him, and he had to get the ball under control and hit it, and it was a deflected shot that Martinez saved. But the finish from Kulusevski's pass. It was a beautiful reverse ball from Kulusevski, perfectly timed. And I love the fact that the goal was actually born of Solanke coming back, working back to press and try and get a ball back, because he was a bit out of position. He'd kind of raced back into almost, not quite, but almost towards the halfway line. So what had happened was he hadn't had to get the ball back because it had already been won back. And then I think it was, I'm trying to remember who won it back for that one. Was that that might be the Ben Davies one. Trying to remember now. I've got it all in my notes as I go on. But anyway, so Solanke was out of position, and the way, I think the Villa kind of players almost forgot that he wasn't there, and so he was able to almost ghost his way through and in between them, and Kulusevski finds it with a lovely ball. It was almost like there was no pressure on him, Solanke, like a training ground thing. Just lifts it over Martinez. World's best goalkeeper voted for it. The local. So that sounds like I'm saying down the town hall. No, at the FIFA, like the Ballon d'Or and all of that. He was awarded best goalkeeper. Yeah, just beautiful. And then easier goal, but in terms of the finish, but not so much the run. The run was perfect, connecting with Richardson's low pass. And his teammates love him. They love what he does. He's quite a shy guy. He's not like a big loud personality or character in the changing room, from what I kind of understand. He's just a really good guy, and they've really taken to him, and they appreciate what he does for them as well. And Johnson said after the game, we're all buzzing for Dom, because it kind of goes under the radar how hard he works for us. We're so thankful for how hard he works and the pressing he does. And then on the ball, it's not just goals. He can hold it up, he can dribble, he's quick, he's strong, he's powerful. He's just such a good player. We pass around a lot, but when we do go a little bit longer, it's more of a pass. It's not really a long ball, and he can hold it up. But then when the ball goes into the box, he's a fox in the box as well. So I really think he showed everything today, and I'm buzzing for him to get 2 goals. And also, those 2 goals now mean that Solanke has contributed 7 goal involvements in his first 10 starts for the club. 5 goals, 2 assists. That's not too bad. I was like I said, the social media is getting a fair bit of flack at the first half of the game. And people just kind of write him off. And I know that is social media. But I just thought, it's not a bad start. 7 goal involvement in 10 games already. That's pretty good. He'll want more and he'll want more goals, but I don't think that's bad at all. Especially bearing in mind the lack of service he's had. And he had the crowd singing his name as well. I think it was second half. And I do wonder whether a game like that, big game in front of a full stadium, scoring twice in front of that South Stand, whether it just helps build that bond and build that connection with the fans and fans there witnessing him in the flesh and seeing everything he does. The ridiculous work rate off the ball, but also the quality on it. That finish for that first goal was sublime. That's the kind of one that anyone else scores that like a celebrated player. You're like, another beauty from Messi, Ronaldo, Cole Palmer, whoever right now. And strangely grouped them all in there. But yeah. I think maybe that gave people a little bit of he's actually rather good. And he really is for Spurs as well. And he said after the game in his club interview, I like to work hard for the team. We need to do whatever we can individually to help the team win. Obviously, being a striker, it's nice to get those goals to add to the performances. It was a few games without one, so I'm delighted to get 2. I think these days everyone sees the data and stuff and how hard I work. People always tell me, and I'm thankful for everyone noticing. But yeah, like I said, getting the goals is always nice as well. And on the 2 assists for his goals from Kulusevski and Richardson, he said they were both set up perfectly. Decky's having a great season. We know that he's got the quality to do that. It was a good play, a bit of good play from Brennan as well to get the ball to Decky. And I trusted him then to find me, and he found me perfectly and set it up. And then the second one from Richie. Pape won the ball back really well, which we love doing as a team. He slipped in Richie and he laid it on the plate for me. He went off injured after that, and hopefully he's all right. Postecoglou loves Solanke. We've gone over it in the past. He's the one that he wanted this summer. I know some people wanted other strikers, but Postecoglou wanted Solanke. And he kind of swatted away the suggestion that these 2 goals continue to underline his faith in him. And he's like, no, It had nothing to do with that, as I said during the week. I just think the enormous effort he put in on Wednesday night to help us win a game of football, not just physically but mentally, and his capacity to help the team in every way he can. To back that up today with such a massive effort again against a pretty difficult team to play against in that sense, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, the goals are great, and of course, as a striker, I'm sure he loves the fact that he can score a couple of goals. But even if he didn't, again, I can't speak highly enough of what he's contributing to our team at the moment. And long may it continue, because with him playing that way, it just makes us a better team. And I love the fact that Postecoglou is kind of building this group of skillful running players that have got a high energy but also lots of skill. And Solanke typifies that. He absolutely does. But he is going to need a rest from time to time. You can't just keep running him into the ground. It's going to become harder with Richarlison being injured. Clutched his hamstring immediately after he played that ball. I was watching the goal, so I assumed he'd collided into the hoardings, the advertising hoarding outside the pitch, but yeah, he didn't. You could see quite clearly on the replay him grabbing the back of his leg, and it just sums up, unfortunately, Richarlison's time at Spurs, really, doesn't it? Makes an impact, gets injured. Makes an impact, gets injured, and this was even like in a microcosm of his whole season, or his 3 seasons now? He's in his 3rd season, and he would have been starting against Galatasaray on Thursday night, and I think. Personally, it's just my assumption, but I would assume that Will Lancashire gets the job because you've won 3 games in Europa League now. You've got to kind of give some rest to players like Solanke. I would definitely be starting Will Lancashire. And no, it's a big game in a hostile environment against a good team that haven't lost a single game in the Turkish league. But I just think, we'll talk about this at the end of the video, but I hope fans give a little bit of leeway to this game because I think Postecoglou has to rest some players. He has to. And it's not a game that's... Sounds awful to say, it's not a must-win game because no game does anyone ever want to lose. But I think there's a little bit of latitude here for, Spurs to change things up. To be fair, as they've done for most of the competition anyway. Because look, you've got to keep players like Solanke fit. If Solanke can stay fit and fresh, he is one hell of a focal point for this Spurs team. It's what they missed, last season. It's like the missing part of the jigsaw, really. Everything he does up there, holding the ball up, but also the goals he's going to score, and he's going to keep scoring goals. There's far more to come. He was excellent. I thought I was just really happy for him as well because strikers are ultimately judged on goals, and that's what people will look at. And I think he's quite capable of doing both. The ridiculous amounts of hard work he does, the pressing, and there was one moment where he kind of ran back and took the ball off Pau Torres and set Spurs away. But he's also very capable of scoring a bundle of goals, including beautiful ones like the first one, and poacher goals like the second one. And then we had Sonny. We've got to talk about Sonny. So we had that moment, the second half, that got people talking. He was back in action, obviously, after his recent absence, because he came back, didn't he, against West Ham. That was the first game while I was away. I watched that. That was an enjoyable game to watch on my phone, that one. But yeah, came back and just, didn't quite feel right after it. There was a bit of soreness, a bit of tiredness. And I felt first half yesterday, I felt it was quite quiet, a little bit rusty. It was, Villa made it difficult for the wide players. Every time Sonny kind of had the ball down the wing, he suddenly had 2 players in front of him to try and get past, and then it was often pushing him inside, and then it was congested in the middle as well. But in the second half, absolutely came alive. Incredible ball into Johnson. And then after that, his tail was up, his confidence was up, and he went on a couple of lovely little runs past players. Then, what was it? It was 6 minutes after his assist, the board goes up, and Postecoglou was looking to make 2 substitutions. Off come Son and Bentancur. Or off were meant to come Son and Bentancur. At first, I thought Son was just walking off the far side. I thought, okay, he's kind of saving time so that Richarlison just can come straight on. Then it kind of became clear, he doesn't actually know he's coming off. And he did this kind of awkward thing where he's like pointing at him like, what, me? I'm coming off? And then, of course, we saw when he eventually did sit in his seat, he was not a happy bunny. He was very disappointed, despondent looking, shouting something. I thought on first viewing that he was shouting, why, but it's difficult to tell. It could have been, I'm watching it on our little monitors we have, so it could have been anything. There was one website that claimed that he was swearing. I don't know. But the whatever he said, he was disappointed. And I can understand why. Because he probably felt, okay, I'm in my rhythm, I'm feeling good, I've got an assist, I'm playing well, and then Postecoglou's taken him off. Postecoglou made it very clear after the game, it was always the intention to bring him off around that mark, because he didn't want the same thing to happen again that happened when he came back against West Ham, when he was excellent against West Ham, but that didn't stop his body from getting having problems with it. So Postecoglou said afterwards he was never going to play more than that today because obviously he had an injury. He came back and last time it was around the 60-minute mark when he kind of got fatigued last time. So he was never going to play more than sort of 55, 60 minutes irrespective of how the game was going. I just want to say that. It's quite interesting. They keep referring to this one as fatigued, which I find an interesting one. Do you miss... I mean, how many games was I away for? Did you miss 2 games through fatigue? Was it 2 in between? No, it would have been 3. Because of Man City as well. Do you miss 3 games because you're fatigued? I just find it an interesting way that it's being described. And he said the great thing was that he made a pretty important contribution before that. The great ball in for our first goal and we got our equaliser. So, again, we've got more battles ahead and we're going to need him. So he was never going to play more than that. And then he was asked about the disappointed reaction in the bench. And he said, no, I didn't see any difference in Sonny. I'd be surprised if any player likes coming off and they're feeling all right. But no. I didn't need to discuss it with him. And, like I said, for us, what's more important is the overall picture. And this is the thing. It's been proved, excuse me, I think my ears and my sinuses are still trying to get over the flight. They're all bunged up and weird. Postecoglou's decision was spot on. It was right. There's no arguing about it because hindsight has proved it to be absolutely right. He grabbed his assists on, made a difference, got his confidence up, got a bit of sharpness in his body. Then others were brought on to take over the role. They did as well. Richarlison got his assist and other players played very well that came on. Spurs did the job with Sonny and they also did the job without Sonny, and it all worked to kind of protect him as well on the sideline to ensure that he's 32 years old now. They've got to take care of some of the muscles that might not recover as quickly as they previously did. It feels like he's superhuman sometimes, Sonny, but he is going to have to be careful when he comes back. If he's come back previously from an injury and not felt quite right afterwards, then you've got to be very careful with him. And Richarlison's injury has only proved how important it is to have Sonny fit because that left-hand side, the options with Odegaard as well out, they're starting to dwindle. And he's going to have to play minutes in the games ahead. And, it's, his disappointment had definitely dissipated by the time the game was over. Spurs do their little kind of players coming down the tunnel cam, and you could see Sonny was in playful mode. He was sticking his tongue out of the camera. He was absolutely fine. I do wonder whether either Postecoglou didn't feel the need to tell Sonny that he was coming off, or potentially maybe they discussed it and said, I'm going to take you off around the hour mark, but then Sonny thought, but I'm playing really well and I'm feeling fine. Why are you still taking me off? Maybe that was what it was about. I don't know. But the thing is, Sonny is big on team ethic. He's really, really big on it, and then the collective and everything. So even if his emotions maybe betrayed him in the moment, he would have very soon realised, I think, that it's about the bigger picture, and it was the right decision, not only from Postecoglou, but for him, for Spurs, and the bigger picture. And I think Sonny will benefit from that in the weeks ahead, not kind of taking any risks over him in his first game back. So that's the attack. What else I want to talk about? I was going to talk about the defence. The defence. I mean, if you've got problems in defence and it don't look good, who are you going to call? Not the Ghostbusters. Probably right now, Radu Dragusin and Ben Davies. Could expect them turning up in proton packs. And this goes back to something I kind of hinted at earlier. Postecoglou made it very clear at the start of this season that it was going to make a big difference if he could hand out minutes in the Europa League and the Carabao Cup to lots of his squad. it would be a big factor in Spurs' success this season, or hopefully success. And the main aspect of that is because we saw last season, with the bare minimum of fixtures being played by Spurs, every time a player was getting injured, another one was having to come in, that player looked out of sorts, rusty, they had no rhythm, no sharpness, they were coming in and they were struggling a lot of the time. This season, every player is getting minutes, every player is getting starts. And so when a player comes into the team because another one's injured, there's less of a drop-off, and in many cases, no drop-off at all. And I think two perfect examples of that are Dragic and Davies. Because you think back to last season alone, when Mickey van der Ven was out, it was like, it's a disaster. You could just like big red light go woo woo. Siren, red lights don't go woo woo. Siren would have gone woo woo. I don't know why I'm talking about woo woos. But yeah, Van der Ven being out, it was a disaster. You know, the world had ended. The whole system revolves around Van der Ven, etc. But mostly, the way Spurs did look like they missed him was, first off, because for a lot of games in a run of about 8 or 9 games, they were playing Ben Davies and Emerson Royal together, 2 fullbacks as centre backs, because they also didn't have Romero. And then when Dragic came in, it was taking him a bit of time to get up to speed. Whereas this season, you know, Dragic starting his 5th game of the season yesterday, would have been another one as well had he not been sent off against Karabag. And he just looks sharper. He's only 22 years old as well. He looks more settled into Premier League life. And he's proven to be quite adaptable as well, because when he was playing with Romero, he's playing on the left side of the back two, the central defensive two. And when Romero goes off, he's playing on the right side of the two. And he did a really good early block to stop. I think he kind of deflected Jacob Ramsey's effort. It was either over or wide. And he's improving all the time, especially with the use of the ball, because that's probably the one bit that I think will have been a bit of because I'm going to have to work on this, because in Italy he wasn't having to do that as much, whereas now with the Postecoglou style of play, he's having to play it quickly under pressure. He's having to find people. There's only one moment I can remember when it was a little bit panicky from him. Otherwise, he was mostly passing around them and quickly very well. And his confidence will continue to grow, and his knowledge of where his teammates will be and what to do with the ball as well. And look, his presence in the air, we know all about it. He was one of the best in Serie A for heading the ball, and I do feel like that's helping Spurs' defensive work from crosses, from set pieces, from everything. He wasn't involved in the Villa goal, which again, only Spurs' second set piece goal conceded this season. Some places throw, quite literally, throw-ins into set piece stats, which I don't like, because you can maybe argue if it's a long throw pumped into the box, and that's kind of like a set piece. But sometimes they're including moments that came from a set piece, and you think that's a whole different phase of play. But yeah, if you're talking free kicks and corners, it is 2 set piece goals this season. And yeah, like I said, it does wind me up when I looked at half time, and I could see on our monitors, I think they were showing was that Sky had the game, their coverage, and it was showing this Tottenham set piece defending over the last 2 seasons. And it was like some big number. Because, yeah, they had a problem last season. We spoke about it so many times. But it just kind of feels a bit weird to lump it all in to say, but the stats were so bad last season. Let's put them all together. Why don't you look at it and say, okay, they conceded this many last season, but this season, just 2. What an improvement. What a shame that they've conceded. And the 2 teams they conceded to, Arsenal and Villa, are among the best set-piece attacking sides in the league. Villa are top now for set-piece goals. So yeah, I do feel it's a bit like doesn't really make much sense. But I guess the narrative forms, and there's not much you can do to shake it, even when the facts going to prove otherwise. Yeah, and even this goal was a bit of misfortune. Pedro Porro did what you're meant to do, is win the initial contact, but he just made a bit of a mess of it. It kind of hit the top of his head, went backwards, hit Bentancur, who didn't really know much about it. And actually, Vicario made a good reflex save from the ball hitting Bentancur and heading towards the line. But unfortunately, he could just push it sideways, and that pushed it to Rodgers, who slammed it into net from very close range. And And the only other save I can really remember Vicario having to make was the one where Onana headed the ball against the right-hand post and it deflected towards Vicario and he pushed it away, or it kind of came off him. And Postecoglou was asked about it after. He's asked whether he'd put any extra work into Spurs set-piece defending in the week in training because of Villa's ability at it. And he also didn't seem very happy about the whole jostling. I mean, if you watch it back, Rodgers is kind of pulling and bashing into Vicario. Brennan Johnson's been knocked around by Pau Torres as well throughout it. It's one of those just become part of the game now, I think. Postecoglou said no, as in we didn't put extra time in set piece work this week, because I think then you fall into the trap of preparing differently. And I've always said that we prepare the same for every game. There's obviously the strengths and areas where they could hurt us. So, look, we conceded from a set piece. I know I'm on my own on this. I don't like them. To me, I think I mentioned in the TV interview, it looks like a scrum. I just don't think that's what football's about. But it's part of football these days where you can just drop the ball in the box and people can fight over it. So disappointing for us to concede from that. But in general, I thought we handled their set pieces really well. They're very good at set pieces. I thought we handled it really well. It was great for us to score another one as well from an attacking set piece. We're scoring goals from different areas, and that's important. So, of course, Nick Montgomery involved in both attacking and defending set pieces. And the work he's done is clear to see. It is. I saw a stat earlier, I can't remember what it was, about the amount of set pieces that Spurs have faced and to have only conceded 2 from them. I can't remember what it was. It's right up there. I don't want to just say any number because it'll be completely wrong, but it's a lot of set pieces they've successfully defended from. But there you go. Ben Davies, I just thought, I watched it in midweek against City from afar, and I thought he did really well when he came on against City, and I felt very similar this time around. He just slipped in and just was like he was been playing for the whole game, and great block to stop Ollie Watkins, which then turned the possession over to Sarr. Sarr put that was one with Johnson Kulusevski, and the ball goes to Solanke. So all came from a Ben Davies block to start the whole move off. And I like the balance as well. The balance between Davies and Dragic. It's quite nice. It works. And again, familiarity. This is what happens. They've played together a number of times in the cup competitions, and they know where each other's going to be. This is, I do think Ben Davies was there for Spurs so much last season. We spoke about it last season, but I felt it was difficult to kind of judge him too harshly, especially as well because he was often playing alongside Emerson, who was not a natural centre back. And obviously Ben Davies himself is a bit of a makeshift centre-back he's become over the years. He now is clearly considered a centre-back at Spurs because you've got Jed Spence, you've got... I think they're being careful with Jed Spence by the looks of it as well. And it's a shame. It's just such a shame he can't play in Europe. And Archie Gray, I think, is being seen as able to cover both full-back positions as well. Could well play there on Thursday night as well. And Ben Davies is seen as that fourth centre-back. It's a really difficult one. We did the podcast earlier with Guesty, and I kind of said I probably would like to see Spurs bring in a bit of cover, even if it's short-term there in January, because I'm just wary of what happens if they lose have 2 players and then kind of have a third that's suspended or injured. But Guesty made the great point, and actually it was an answer to my questions. I don't know why I forgot it. That Postecoglou said he didn't want to block the path of Vuskovic coming in for next season, or Ashley Phillips maybe coming back as well. And I get that, absolutely. I think Vuskovic is going to be an absolute star. And then you've got, I think Alfie Dorrington's also got a big future ahead of him as well. So I get that. I'm just a little wary of the second half of the season, and I just got this feeling we're going to end up seeing Archie Gray getting more of a centre-back outing at times if those injuries do pile up. But back on Ben Davies, I love the way that there's these kind of 2 partnerships right now, but they can all interchange. So you've got Romero and Van der Ven, but you've got Dragic and Davies who play very well together, both quite physical. Dragic obviously is the big man in the air as well. And yeah, we'll see now whether they get an extended spell together, because Romero's foot injury, which he did with that kind of wild lunge, I think, that got a yellow card, didn't he? For him to go off, it must have been pretty sore. In Postecoglou's words, I think he called him a tough cookie, so it must have been painful. And yeah, well, the wish seems to be that Van der Ven and Romero miss some similar time periods together. Not as long, but there's been certainly, like I said, we had Davies and Emerson together because of that. And that is the thing as well, is you look back to last season, it wasn't just Emerson, it was Eric Dyer coming in at points as well, who didn't fit the system. And now at least when Dragoshin and Davies come in, you can argue whatever you like about quality levels, or whether they're substandard, whatever. But obviously, remember, Dragoshin is only 22. But also, they suit the system. They can play the system as centre-backs very well. So you're not changing your ethos by bringing in these players to come into the team. When he was asked about the Romero and Richarlison injuries, actually, he took a chance to kind of praise the defenders. And when he was speaking about the injuries, he said, yeah, Richie obviously felt something in the action of setting the goal up. His hamstring, so we'll see. Romero, yeah, it was in that challenge. He felt his foot was sore. I don't have any sort of information yet. Obviously, he's a pretty tough cookie. For him to come off, it must be sore. But yeah, look, it's not ideal. But again, it's another game where we've had to reshuffle our backline. Radu has played left centre-back, right centre-back, left centre-back, right centre-back. He's talking about the last two games. In both games, he's had to switch. Ben Davies has had to come in at different times, and Destiny midweek, and the boys are handling it really well. As I said, it's not ideal, but hopefully both are not too serious. Romero posted on social media, or his people posted, whoever posted it on social media, great performance today, now to recover and keep it up. So he didn't really refer to the injury. I don't know whether recover means the injury or it just means physically, tiredness. But I think if he does have to miss a couple of games ahead of this international break, these two, Thursday and Sunday, I think Postecoglou will be very absolutely fine with picking Dragoshin and Davies together, and hopefully they can stay fit. So we've done the attack, we've done the defence. I touched on Udogie earlier. I thought Udogie played well. I thought Porro didn't offer too much going forward, but I thought he defended well on the whole. Other than that, obviously, iffy moment with heading the ball behind him for the corner. Looking at the midfield, I have to start with Pape. I just thought he was brilliant. I just thought he got better and better as the game wore on. You kind of have to, again, like Dragoshin, you have to remind yourself he's only 22. It's mad that he's only 22. It's because he played last season. He played more than 2,000 minutes of Premier League football despite his age. Postecoglou loves him, believes he's going to be something special. You saw that in pre-season straight away last season. And his second season has been kind of a big developmental one because he's had to deal with kind of having less game time, quite frankly. He started only 3 Premier League matches in these opening 10 games of the season. Yeah, he's played in the other competitions, but in terms of the Premier League, Postecoglou has been going with different options. I kind of feel he's just responded perfectly, and he's kept on pushing his game on, kept responding to that. And when Spurs need more energy, a box-to-box player, Postecoglou just turns straight to him. Obviously, again, watching from afar, but you could tell in the West Ham game, the introduction of Sarr, I think, came from Madison, didn't it? Completely changed the whole dynamic of that midfield. Involved again in second and third goals for Spurs. It's pressing and creating the latter. And he just pulled Villa's midfield all over the park because he never stands still. We talk about these skillful runners, and Sarr is one of those. He just never stops. In one moment, he can be bursting to the box to score. In the next moment, he can be bursting through the midfield to set something up or intercept. And in the next moment, he can be on the edge of his own box, chasing back to try and get a tackle in. Last season, he got 3 goals, 3 assists from 35 appearances. He's almost matched that within 15, despite the lack of starts in the Premier League. He's got 3 goals and 2 assists. And he turns up in the big games as well. He's got assists against Man U and West Ham. Scored that beautiful goal against Man City in midweek as well. Postecoglou took slight umbrage, I think, at the way I phrased my question. I asked something along the lines of, he's had to work to get back into your Premier League starting 11, but you must be delighted with the way he's just continuing to grow this season. And it's a fair point because he's only started 3 of the 10 Premier League games. Postecoglou kind of went, well, they're never out of my lineup. It's different challenges along the way, but he probably played as much as anyone last year. I rate him so highly. His capacity again to work for the team, but also the quality he has in breaking open oppositions with his running with the ball. I knew he'd be important today because they've got such a hard-working midfield with Onana, Tielemans, McGinn, Rodgers. They don't really play with wide players. They work awfully hard in that midfield area, and you've got to match that. You're never going to break them open unless you do that. And Pape just put in another enormous effort, along with Rodri and Biss when he came on, and Deki, of course. Deki Kulusevski, he just goes from strength to strength, isn't he? Probably Palace is the first time I've watched a game this season and been really like, where's Deki? Like, why is Deki not kind of performing as he is? And on the whole, though, he's just been brilliant. And what's been really important is last season, obviously, Spurs, a bit like we talked about Van der Ven in the defence, but in midfield, I think they were so reliant on their creativity coming from James Maddison. And this season, Kulusevski has actually become the undroppable. And Maddison, we're seeing in the last couple of games, has been the man on the bench. That reverse pass to Solanke was so good from Kulusevski. Even VAR was like, oh, we need to find a reason to rule this off. We cannot compute. I know it's not a Dalek, but yeah, it's this season kind of early on, there's been a lot of people maybe didn't realise just how well he's been playing. Maybe people that don't watch Spurs regularly, because a lot of his work was coming in the build-up play, the pre-assists. And maybe the headline figures, goals, assists weren't there. But actually, they're starting to build up now. I was looking at it just before I did this. 7 goal involvements now in his opening 15 games. 2 goals and 5 assists. And actually, most of those goal involvement came in his 10 starts. I think 6 in the 10, I think, were. So, yeah. Maddison is being pushed by the competition. That's a good thing. This is what we say. This is what you need in football. You need competition. You need a big squad all pushing each other. And I love the fact that he was not to be overshadowed on the day. He came on actually didn't come on against City at all, did he? But in this game, it ended up being 19 minutes due to those 10 minutes of added time. And Solanke again, working hard, winning the free kick on the edge of the box. And I think it was George Sessions from PA said to me, Maddison, he's going to score this. The narrative is there for him, isn't it? And it was a beautiful curling free kick into the top right corner. And as I said earlier, Martinez kindly creating those extra 10 minutes of added time in order for Maddison to grab the goal. And there's a lovely angle of the goal that I saw where you've got the player, I can't remember who it was, the Villa player lying on the floor behind the wall, is it the draft excluder they call it? And he's just watching, it's like, oh no, it's just going over his head. And Martinez, best goalkeeper in the world, just going, oh, just watching it, can't do a single thing. It was perfect. Maddison went wild, just ran across the pitch, did a big heart to his family in his box, which is in the West Stand, not too far along from us. It was a landmark goal for him. 50th goal in the Premier League, his 9th direct free kick in the competition. And he got a big hug and a little kind of seemed like a heartfelt chat with Postecoglou after the game as well on the pitch. That was good for Maddison. That's what he needs. And you presume he'll start and play a big portion of the game on Thursday night as well. And he's got to show his experience. You know, you'd imagine he and Basuma will both start. And the two of them have to push on what would probably be a young team. And they've got to use all of their nous and experience in the difficult kind of environment, I think it's fair to say. Basuma and Bentancur both played well. They kind of shared the number 6 load across the game. Bentancur was probably Spurs' best player in the first half, I think. But he started to just kind of lunge into challenges. Whether he just, fitness-wise, wasn't able to keep up, I don't know. But he started to make a couple of challenges. There was one in particular, and you kind of thought, how did he get away? I think it was the ref initially didn't give a free kick, then decided it was a free kick. And by that point, I think it was almost like, well, I don't know if I should give a yellow card now. And we were all watching it back on the screen. It's like, ooh, that's not a great challenge. And there were a few moments like that. And I think maybe, I don't know whether Postecoglou just felt, we really kind of can't lose him to a red card or even yellow card. I think he's on 3 yellow cards, so they could lose him to a ban. And obviously, talking of bans, we're still waiting to hear back, aren't we, on what's to come in terms of all of that and various things. And sorry, people sending me messages about Ruben Amorim. I've had a couple of people just sending me various messages about the press conference he's done. But yeah, and I just think he decided, right, Bentancur's just walking a bit of a tightrope here, even though he hasn't had a yellow yet. And we'll bring Basuma on, and I think it worked. Basuma, I thought, was very good when he came on as well. And like I say, big chance for him, hopefully on Thursday night to play. So yeah, all the subs did well. Everyone impacted the game, even in the late stages. Archie Gray getting a bit of time at left back just came on and gave him more experience. Big Premier League game, and yeah, like I say, Postecoglou's what he said at half time to them, the tactical little tweaks, the substitutions. Yeah, he did good. He did good, and the crowd was singing his name. There's this kind of misconception, I think, among some that Postecoglou football is like it's simple or one-dimensional, and in truth, it's anything but. And I think the more I've seen it this season, we always said, or he said this, to be fair, that the first season, it's all about getting the philosophy drilled into the players. Excuse me. And in the second season, you'll start to see the tactical detail and the layers put on that once the underlying foundations are there. And I'm definitely noticing this second season, you can see a lot more intricacy to it. You can see where sometimes the fullbacks aren't inverted. You're seeing sometimes it will be the wingers that stay wide. Sometimes one of the wingers comes in. See, sometimes the midfield, and it's very dependent on the personnel. He'll change the personnel to get completely different tactical kind of output from them. So it may be that Madison and Kulusevski play with Bentancur or Basuma. And there's a whole different dynamic to suddenly having Sarr in there and a runner and a battler. And it's, yeah, he said this before, he'll often use the personnel as the tactical change. And I'm seeing a lot of that. And what I thought was really interesting, I noticed it late last night. Joe Hart did, he was on Radio 5 Live, and he was asked about Ange Postecoglou. And don't forget, Joe Hart had a hell of a career, retired in the summer, obviously at Spurs for a little while, but he's a Premier League winner, I think 2 titles to his name, played in Italy, he's been an England goalkeeper, he's played for loads and loads of the top managers in the game. And he just spoke about the fact that it was actually his 2 seasons with Postecoglou at Celtic that were like no other in his development, even though he's well into his 30s at the time. He said, and these are the quotes, it's a little bit long, so sorry, it does become a little bit story time with Alistair, but he said, I'll be honest, I feel so lucky I played those last 3 years. My last 3 managers in England, David Moyes, Sean Dyche, Jose Mourinho, all top managers in their own right. And obviously that's after having been at Man City with the managers he had there. He said, they're all top managers in their own right and they've done incredible things, but they're very much hard work, dedication, learning what you need to do and going out and performing. Then I went and had 3 years at Celtic, 2 of them with Ange Postecoglou and 1 of them with Brendan Rodgers. And Ange Postecoglou blew my mind because he really opened me up. I actually think I'd be sat here having this conversation and not being able to understand Enzo Maresca and what his thought process is if I hadn't experienced what I did in terms of that specific detail. And he kind of explained a little further what he meant. Because I haven't listened to the whole thing, I've just listened to that little bit about Postecoglou. They must have been presumably speaking about Chelsea and the tactical side of things and what he's done. And he said, I always thought playing out from the back, oh my God, does that mean that I need to do Cruyff turns, pick out passes? No, it doesn't. It means that I need to stand on the ball, I need to make sure that my centre-backs are either side of me, my number 6 is showing, and then if the space is being created, I'm not playing out for the sake of playing out, I'm playing out so we can score. If that full press comes and all I see is opposition players stood next to mine, I'm giving that clarity in my mind. There's a little dinked ball into the striker's chest that's available. And all these sort of things come together. It's a totally different game and a totally different thought process. Like I say, I feel truly blessed because honestly, I'd feel out of my depth if I sat in here 3 years ago trying to have this conversation with you. And yeah, it just shows you how... I think that is the thing about the Postecoglou way. It's an entirely different way of thinking, a lot of it. And there's that bedding in period. And I don't think it's just for players. I think it's for us as media. I think it's for fans as well. We're still kind of like, you still hear people like, get it out. Why are you playing out for the back? Hoof it, kind of thing. And then you see some of the beautiful goals that Spurs are scoring from those moments. And yesterday, as I said, Villa, 0 times they won the ball back in the final third. Spurs just played around them. And it's because they're getting more and more and more used to it, the Spurs players. And it is starting to click. And they are understanding this very different thought process that Joe Hart talks about. Look, it is still a work in progress. Of course it is. The away results show that. They need to improve. What I would say is they need to improve to match the performances. Because for me, again, a bit like the set pieces, I want to separate. People are very quick that if they want to make a kind of a negative case against Postecoglou or Spurs or whatever, and this can also include Spurs fans, that include last season. And I get it, but we all kind of cherry pick certain aspects of what we want. And like last season, when people wanted to kind of say how they didn't like things that Postecoglou were doing, they were forgetting the first 10 games of the season when they obviously won a lot of points, and then they kind of started like a bit of a freight train. And now it's almost like when I say winning 9 out of 11, I'm just talking about recent form. That's it. But then some people are going, well, you're forgetting all of that before that. It's not really that. I'm just talking about recent form. But I do feel like, I guess it works both ways. You can kind of pick the numbers you want to use. But what I would say, the reason I'm saying that I personally want to keep the seasons separate is because I feel like the second season is so different. I'm seeing a structure to the team. I'm seeing the performances on the whole on the road have been really good, barring Palace and the second half at Brighton. Those for me are the two kind of moments when I've been a bit like, yeah, that's just rubbish. Whereas actually in the rest of them, they should have won those games. They should have been far ahead. Even, Brighton, they should have had that game buried. There's no way they should have lost that game. So I don't look at the away form this season and think, oh my goodness, that's a massive cause for concern. Oh, it's terrible. I just see where they haven't made the result match the performance. And that's something they need to do, and that will come. And I think some people have been comparing kind of where they were points wise now to where they were last season after that incredibly fast start. I think some of those lost points came from those away games where they've just haven't made their performances count. And I just think that it kind of belies the whole overall improvement, like I say, in the structure. And I do feel like there's a real foundation there now to be a more even season. Like we said about last season, first 10 games were brilliant and it was so muddled and messy from then on. Whereas this season, I feel like, yes, the results in the away games haven't been great, but I actually think there's more of a consistency to the performances. And now once they start 9 wins out of 11, that is clicking. That is showing that you're getting the results of performance. Yeah, the two annoying games against Palace and Brighton in the second half, of course, that they are so annoying. But ultimately, it does feel like they are turning performances into results, and hopefully that continues. And I do feel like, again, youthful nature of the squad, that is going to have a bearing on some of the inconsistencies within the game sometimes. But that's where you get the options and the ability to change players without changing the way they're playing their football. That's where it's going to make the difference. In that some players, just naturally young players, are not going to be as good in the next game as they were in the last. It's just going to happen. Like, we're raving about Pape Matar. He's only 22 years old. He may not be as good in his next start. That's just the way it goes with players. But he's got the options to bring in and change that and make different choices. As long as injuries don't derail that. That's where the problems occur. And look, Postecoglou made it very clear after the game yesterday, it's all part of this process. And the world did not end when they lost to Palace, nor is it time for an open top bus parade, I guess, because they've beaten City and Villa since that match. The way he put it is way better than that. He said, you don't fall off cliffs and you don't climb mountains within a week. It's all part of the same process for me. We're going to have bumps along the way. It's how you address them, how you cope with them, how you rebound and learn from them. That's the key thing. And we had a disappointing day last Sunday. But when you're coming in on Monday, we had 2 big games this week, really important games. So there's no point in feeling sorry for ourselves. We had to come in and get our heads straight and work back towards being the team we want to be, and that's what happened. But it doesn't mean that that's the end of it now. We've still got to push on. We've still got to get better. We've still got to improve and keep pushing on. I'm totally focused on the long game here of who we want to be. And little bumps along the road hurt, but you kind of know that's part of our growth. And the good performances and the good moments are there for our growth as well. Because you've got to deal with both, I think, in the same way, with your eyes sort of firmly fixed ahead on where you're heading. I don't spend too much time thinking about the table, but it just looks like there's a lot more congestion in terms of the field itself. Some of that, I think, is just the attrition rate of players at the moment, which is making it hard for teams to get into smooth water, so to speak. We're all having to deal with it, I guess, so that's a part of it. The table is only important for me at the end of the year, end of the season, he means. While we're running in the race, I don't like looking either side of me. I keep saying to the players, if I was a racehorse, and I'm not, I would be one with blinkers. I just look at the finish line. I think that's right. I don't know much about horse racing. Oh yeah, that was the way. Sorry, I run that together. He said, I just look at the finish line. And then as they went to the next question, he was like, I think that's right. I don't know much about horse racing. Yeah. And look, the table that he's not looking at, it shows Spurs are starting to rise now. They are, like I said, the Premier League's top goal scorers. They're seventh, but they're only 3 points off third place. Nuno Espirito Santos did a great job with Nottingham Forest. They're sitting in third. Arsenal and Chelsea, who have received loads of praise at various points in this early months of this campaign. Spurs haven't got much. Arsenal are 2 points ahead of Spurs. Chelsea are 1 point ahead of Spurs. Yeah, look, Spurs do have to find that consistency in the league. You know, I don't think they've put together back-to-back wins, is it, in the league? I can't remember what it was now. There was some stat I was looking at. While I've been away, is kind of confused. When I'm just there at the games covering them, I can just think straight back and think about all the various matches. Whereas when I've been away, it weirdly messes with that. But yeah, there's much more to come. There's still, you know, he talks about they've got further gears in games. They've got further gears to go into this season. They're still building. And yeah, I think they're going to get better and better. I do. Tough kind of, or interesting week is probably the best way to put it. Late night game on Thursday, Galatasaray. It's not here. In the UK, it's 5:45, I think it is. But over in Turkey, I think it's a 3 hour, they're 3 hours ahead. So it's going to be an 8:45 late kickoff over there. So I said earlier, I think if I'm Postecoglou, I'm making a lot of changes. I am. Because they are in a strong position in the table, in the Europa League big table. So are Galatasaray. And like I say, Galatasaray haven't lost a single game, I don't think, in the Turkish Super League, I think it's called over there, with Fenerbahce behind them. And Jose Mourinho was amazing this weekend. You just imagine being a journalist in that press conference. He was going off about the whole Turkish football in an 8-minute rant. He did a knee slide after they scored a late winner, which didn't quite work, and he tumbled over. It's just, he is box office. He really is. And then, yeah, just 2.5 days after Spurs land back in the UK, they've got to face Ipswich at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Ipswich, who will have had a completely fresh week. And hopefully they don't look at it and think, oh, you know, Ipswich, bottom 3, yeah, we should do that. Don't think like that. Look at Palace. Look at the Palace game where Palace had not won a single game yet in the Premier League, and you went there and you absolutely stank the place out. Please don't do that again. I know it's at home, but still, just don't do it again. And yeah, and I do think it all comes back to Postecoglou. He's kind of taken some gambles, ridden the criticism I think he's got this season to ensure that players have got lots of minutes and they're all desperate to be involved, and it is paying dividends. And look, even Sonny's moment, I think Postecoglou probably privately was delighted with his reaction. He kind of wants his captain to be showing the way of like, I just want to play. I just want to play every single minute. I might be 32 years old. I might be, you know, having to think about the team, but I want to play. And I think he'll love that attitude that everyone should want to play in every game and want to be pushing each other, fighting for a spot. That's how the best teams are made. And look, there's still plenty of work to be done. There's nowhere near the finished product yet. There's loads of stuff to be ironed out. But I still feel like the direction of Tottenham Hotspur right now is the clearest I've seen it in years. And there's this Australian chap born in Greece who's pointing the way, saying that's where we need to go. And yeah, it's been fun. It's entertaining. You know, when you're watching the Premier League's top scorers and they've won 9 out of 11. Like I said at the top of this, it's a time to enjoy it. It's good fun, and let's hope they can continue it. I definitely hope so. Right, so that's the first one back. I am heading off to Istanbul. I've got to head off a little bit early actually there because the flights didn't quite work. So I'm going to head off there tomorrow night. We'll have the press conference on Wednesday with Postecoglou and a player. I think we get to see them train for a little spell as well. And then we'll have the match late on Thursday night for me, early for you. And then not going to be back in time for the press conference on Friday because I'm pretty sure Spurs are going to continue to do their recent run of doing early press conferences back in the UK after Spurs arrive back, which is something Postecoglou wants to do, I think, because he doesn't like kind of thinking about the next game straight after the last one, which is fair enough. And it's good for the media because you get more stuff. But a lot of our journalists who are not going to be back in time, who are over in Turkey, so there'll be other people doing that. But I shall definitely have a read and pick it up. And then we've got Ipswich on Sunday. So next video, maybe Friday night, I might be able to sneak that in and talk about the game out in Turkey. But if not, it'll definitely be on Monday after the Ipswich game. But yeah, we'll see how we go. Right, so there you go, back in the UK. I love the comments after the little video I did in Charleston. I didn't even realise at the time, people noticed, like, you found a blue wall. You found a room with a blue wall. And I hadn't even thought about it when I was doing it. It was only when people commented that, yes, I did manage to find the one hotel in Charleston, maybe, that had a blue wall. So yeah, I'm still doing the running, still preparing. I did a couple of runs. This is going to sound so look at me, but I did do a couple of runs in the heat in Miami alongside the South Beach, which was cool, was very cool, but was definitely not cool in terms of temperature. It was like 29, 30 degrees, and yeah, my body was like, what are you doing to me after pretty much 2 weeks of eating everything I possibly could that America had to offer. So yeah, I am still doing that. The marathon is still being worked towards, so of course, please, you've been very generous in the marathon donations. I'll pop the link underneath this video because I haven't done that in a while. We're right below £17,000 for cancer research, which is amazing. I think I'm about 50 quid short of doing that, something like that. But yeah, I just want to keep pushing on because it does push me on massively as well. I feel the pressure, the weight of all the money that's gone to such an amazing cause, and I got to do it. I've got to get over that finish line, and I want to try and do it in a decent time as well if I can. I just got to get fit. I kind of want to get at this 2 weeks out of the way of holiday, enjoy myself, and now back into the rhythm, and I'm going to punish myself, and these dodgy knees are going to be destroyed, I have no doubt. Right, time to head off. Yeah, I shall talk to you hopefully later in the week. I'll try and do a Friday night one if I can, and we'll discuss another continental game in what is going to be a very interesting atmosphere. My first trip to Turkey and Istanbul, and yeah, we'll see what comes of it. But great game yesterday, great fun, big result against one of the Premier League's top sides right now, and that's it, right direction, fantastic. Right, time to go. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.